Hello, good evening, morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Thank you for joining us today. And as Desiree said, we're both very passionate about this topic. My name, again, is Kelly Bryant. I'm Assistant Dean of Clinical Affairs and Simulation, an Associate Professor at Columbia School of Nursing. And besides my new role, one of the aspects of that role is also to incorporate more DEI into our nursing curriculum. So what better place, what better way of doing that than through simulation? So we're going to discuss, again, just a casual conversation between Desiree and I about just different tips and ways that we can increase the diversity within our simulation centers, within our scenarios that we run. And then we're looking forward to your questions and having a lively discussion after our presentation. So, you ready, Desiree? Let's do it. Okay. Curtis, do you want me to share my screen or do you have it pulled up?
That'd be me. And yeah, I can pull it up for you.
Perfect. All right, so hello everyone and welcome to Healthcare Simulation Week. We're glad to be with you today for a very important topic that Desiree and I are very passionate about. So we're going to talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion in simulation. My name is Kelly Bryant. I am the Assistant Dean of Clinical Affairs and Simulation at Columbia University School of Nursing. And now I'm going to introduce my colleague.
I'm Desiree Diaz. I'm an Associate Professor, Undergrad Simulation Coordinator at University of Central Florida.
All right. So we decided that instead of having a very formal PowerPoint presentation, we just wanted to have just a casual discussion about tips, lessons learned, things that we can do to increase DEI in our simulation centers and in our simulation curriculum. So the first thing we want to talk about a little bit is just diversity in general. Myself, I am Afro-Cuban, and you can see darker skin. Obviously, when people look at me, they may not be.
Wait a minute, Kelly. I'm Afro-Caribbean, but I have lighter skin and my hair is an S corsa. How does that work?
Because we come in all different shades, colors, depending on where we're from, our ancestry. So there is not one type. When we think about a Black person, I know sometimes people have this image of this particular medium to dark skin tone and this coarse texture hair, but just a lesson that we do. We all are different. We all come in different, characteristics, physical characteristics to cultural considerations, even though we may both be, like we said, Afro-Caribbean.
So, it's one of the things that I really think we have to have a bigger discussion on such a broader level, because many people don't realize there's a difference between race and ethnicity. Ethnicity is, yeah, I'm Guyanese and I'm from St. Martin, that's my ethnic background. But my race, we often just put people in sections of Black, white, but we get such a deeper understanding of our patient population, our colleagues, but also our simulated participants in simulation if we change up the diversity a little bit. So Kelly, how are some of those ways that you do that up at Columbia?
So some ways that we try to incorporate, whether it's culture, is being conscious of it, first of all. When we're creating our scenarios and our cases, making sure that we're not using those stereotypical cases, such as always, starting 27-year-old African-American with diabetes, high blood pressure, and obesity. I said, if I hear that one more time in our case, that's what creates those biases. We keep on having that same narrative, the same, case scenario that we're presenting to our students, but also being mindful about making sure in certain scenarios that we create a person. That person has, like you said, an identity. They have a sexual orientation. We don't have all of our scenarios where it's a heterosexual, couple. What are the cultural characteristics? Some of our patients have different religions. They have different languages they speak. This is what represents, I live in New York City, obviously one of the most diverse, cities in the world. And we want to make sure that we give life to those scenarios and give our students various opportunities to care for, even though they're simulated, different populations that are diverse. And even the way our simulation center looks, do we take an inventory of your simulation center? Do you have mannequins, task trainers of different shades and tones? The pictures on your wall, are they from various, people from various different backgrounds? Are you showing some of we have a maternity room. Is it always that mom and dad couple with a baby, or are we having diverse couples where it's same-sex couples? Just some of those things that you want to keep in mind when thinking about our simulation environment. What about you, Desiree? What are some of the things?
I think one of the biggest things I try to do is I look at the demographics of where we're living to have that representation. Now, it doesn't help if you're in a homogeneous group where everybody is the same. And, Kelly, you and I have both had the questions from our colleagues like in the middle of Central America, where predominantly they are 99.5% white America. And they're, really tentative about increasing diversity. However, they know it's important. So you can't just go off the demographics, but I try to make sure if for us, we're in Central Florida, that we have a big Asian population that people don't realize, that we have obviously a Hispanic population. And I say obviously, because we are a Hispanic serving institution. So, and we have a Black population, but in that Black population, kind of alluding to what you and I have just talked about, we have Haitian Creole, we have a lot of Caribbean, we have a lot of Southern Black people. So it's, really mixing up what you present as characteristics in a sim. Now, does that take more time? Yes, it takes more time. But one of the things we try to do is get our scenarios on an annual basis to be reviewed. So by every other year, scenarios reviewed, and we'll change it up. I mean, there's a lot of moving around in the country, especially right now, from north to the south, which changes up what our students are going to see in the hospital or even in the clinic setting. So that's one way we try to do it. We definitely try to change up the tonality of skin tones of our mannequins and task trainers. But that brings up another question we often get. It is not accurate. One of our mannequins has about 3 different shades of brown. She goes from cocoa chocolate to a deep chocolate to, I don't even know, cafe au lait. And when you say to the vendors, it's, oh, well, the pigment is different based on the material of the mannequin. So you can't get so caught up in, oh, it doesn't match, but does it match enough where it's not like we have to say that the patient has vitiligo to incorporate the differences. Now, that is something I have done when I didn't have all the correct parts that match the mannequin, is I added that in, and vitiligo is higher instance in different populations. So I just brought that into the scenario. So that's one way. How do you problem solve?
Oh boy. I think we need to also have these conversations with our vendors, because it's not enough just to take these mannequins and just put a little dye and keep all the other features the same. And I know that there's companies out there that are working on it. They need to also, there's certain facial characteristics that, are common among different ethnicities that I think also should be taken into consideration. And besides just race, let's talk about even size. Not everybody is a size whatever, 10, 12, the same size that our mannequins are. We need to have mannequins that are different stature. So we definitely have had these conversations with the vendors to make sure that they're producing these products that are more diverse. But also another way we get around it is we use a lot of standardized patients. So we make sure that the people that we're hiring for our standardized patients are also diverse. We have different.
We have the funding for that.
And we have people who are transgender standardized patients that contribute a lot to our curriculum and teach our students about how do we have that conversation? How do we make sure we use the correct terminology? So just again, making sure you have diversity both with your standardized patient, with your simulation team, with that reflect your student population also.
And you bring up a good point. DEI, or diversity, equity, inclusion, isn't just about race, tonality of skin. It's about sexual orientation, potentially. It's about gender identification. It could also be about populations that are displaced, meaning maybe you're in an environment where you have a lot of people that have just been released from correctional facilities. what stigma does that bring in? So it's including your whole demographic, but more than just, like I said, language, access, color of the skin, and those types of things. Now, one way I was teasing with my colleague, as I often do, she has a great SP program. Now you go to a lot of public universities, you know, it's a struggle to get SPs, to pay SPs. So we do have a volunteer program, but that's still a struggle and you're relying on volunteers. However, what you can do to increase your volunteers or your applicants for the SP program is get in contact with the cultural centers around you. You can, if you're in an academic setting, that's easy because there's every cultural center that you could think about on campus related to race, ethnicity, religion, sexual preference, and orientation. All of that's there. If you're in a hospital setting, one of the hospitals I did created a DEI group, and that was part of their ladder. So you could create diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then you have a cadre of people that can influence your simulations. So don't feel like you have to have a lot of revenue to be able to include DEI. You can utilize what you have there.
But what about this question that a lot of times people face, particularly educators, when they say, well, I don't know if I have enough experience. I'm a little nervous to bring up these topics about DEI. I don't want to offend anybody. I'm not sure if I'm doing it correctly. What do we say to individuals who want to increase this in their curriculum, but just aren't sure, aren't comfortable on how to do it?
Yeah, I think that can be a very tricky area for them. You know, you seem like you're going out on the limb and you're worried. No different than I recently had a scenario and I had Afro-Caribbean, the term Afro-Caribbean, right? When I look at that term, I'm like, yes, that's who I identify with because I'm from the Caribbean. My ancestry is from Africa. Okay. Well, when I started to look at it, I actually called Kelly and I was like, Kelly, should I use the term Black with capital B? And you'll notice I'll say capital B because we're not crayons, you know? So I'll say capital B, capital W. We don't say any other color. It's only we choose black and white to capitalize. Everybody else is wherever their demographic, whether it be Asian, Pacific Islander, whatever. And we had a good conversation and she encouraged me. So it's not like you get to a level and you're like, oh yes, I got it. I reached out and said, well, what do you think? And she said, don't be afraid. And I was like, all right. And she's like, if you can identify why you're using that term. I was like, okay, well, she is from the patient scenario. She's Afro-Caribbean, you know, she's from the islands, but she's also, for her, from Africa. That's where her ancestry was. I was like, okay, I like that better than just B, capital B for Black. And it took a colleague to say and to explore with me, well, why are you using that term? What are you thinking? Mm-hmm. So reach out to people that you're comfortable with. I've also reached out to colleagues in social work, DEI officers, and asked specifically, maybe it's about a population I'm unfamiliar with. Yeah. You know, I want to increase my Asian influence in our lab. I am not Asian. Mm-hmm. So what do? I can ask students, I can ask people, and I go to the literature. Okay, here's the statistics as to why I want to do this. Mm-hmm. And then I gain some allies to help make sure that it's culturally sensitive.
Exactly. And it'll never be 100%. You know, prime example is there's some of my colleagues who don't like the word Black. I work with someone who hates the term Hispanic and uses Latino and hates Latinx. So, I mean, you know, you just kind of have to know that there's not one that fits all. And even within cultures, you know, someone could be Afro-Caribbean or Afro-Cuban and still there are differences between individuals and we all don't fit into these categories. So yeah, and like you said, you brought up a good point too. When we're developing these scenarios, whether they're scenarios specific about a different culture, different race, or about sexual orientation, if we're uncomfortable creating those scenarios, make sure that we speak to others when we're creating them, because the last thing we want to do is create something that is not culturally sensitive, that could be offensive, and implement those into our curriculum. So
Good point.
very good
And
point.
in closing, as we close our time, I would like to give one nugget, and maybe Kelly, you give one nugget. I want you to understand that not one person, or even not even a group of 10, is a representative or the spokesperson of everyone.
Mhm.
So I am not the spokesperson for every Afro-Caribbean person that's out there. I'm not the spokesperson for every American out there. So if you go into that mindset, it's, okay, I'm doing my due diligence to make sure it's culturally sensitive to this expert panel. So oftentimes, even if you're publishing, you can say that scenario was vetted with a panel of experts in DEI, just to make sure people are aware you did check it with somebody other than yourself.
Mhm.
And perfect examples always go into that, where in my culture, I'm like, well, what do you mean? Of course we'd have this scarf on the patient. And then one of my colleagues from the same culture will say, that's not how we do in our island. So it's a difference between the islands, and we chuckle, but that does actually happen. What's your nugget, Kel?
I would say that although the topic of DEI could be scary for individuals because it could be controversial, we don't want to stir up emotions or feelings or offend anyone. But I have to say, not doing something, the silence of not addressing it, is also a major problem. Students expect this in our curriculum. So again, do everything you can, if you're uncomfortable, to educate yourself. There are so many resources out there. Just because I'm a person of color doesn't mean I know everything about DEI and how to incorporate a curriculum. So I go to these trainings, and there's toolkits out there. There's so many resources now. So I just encourage people, just start with something small, even if it's just looking at your scenarios and incorporating culture or anything about race or sexual orientation that you haven't done before, and adding that and making it meaningful, not just adding it just to add it, but also maybe the pre-simulation assignment you give students may have a question about culture on that assignment, so that we are educating future healthcare providers. We know that there's a problem with health equity. We know that patients aren't treated fairly, but what can we do about it so that when these students graduate, they'll be more of a patient advocate. They will be out there addressing this health inequity and helping to solve this problem. So I guess my last thing is just, let's do something. We have to do something. So.
And in closing, as co-chairs of Healthcare for Simulation Week, we are proud of you that you've joined us for this little session, this little decaf coffee chat. Feel free to reach out anytime. Go on the website. What can you do for Healthcare Simulation Week? See you next year.
Bye, everyone.
You're muted, Cal.
The famous unmuted. All right, so we are back. So I see we have a couple of questions, but please keep the questions coming in the chat. If you prefer to ask us live, that's also fine. So Desiree, let's see the first one. I believe we have a couple of questions about SPs. So we have one from Jude. I don't know where you live, Jude, but it's saying you're having a hard time recruiting SPs that are diverse, and any advice on how he can increase the diversity of his SPs. Doesn't have a lot of time.
And then you have the US citizen component of that too, what adds another level of complexity. My go-to is always the cultural centers on campus. Even if you are not in a university, tap into those resources on campus. There's a good cadre of students on a university or a college setting that are US citizens, so that would take away from that. Now the training to be an SP is where you really have to worry about how do you attract them and maintain them. My other suggestion is your local city near you oftentimes has fine arts groups and associations. Here in Orlando, yes, we're a city in Kelly in New York makes it a little easier, but we still struggle, definitely more than Kelly, because we've had that conversation with getting SPs. And what we have is our College of Medicine has a robust SP program that pays way more than what we're able to afford. So not only do you have the competition to get the people, but then you have that competition within the university of pay. But that would be my suggestion. What about you, Kelly?
I would say also, I also talk to my SPs and they actually refer other SPs. And I may tell them I'm looking for someone of a certain age or a certain ethnicity or race. So they actually are a great source for referring others. The other thing is, I think you had sort of mentioned, Desiree, to schools that have acting programs, you know, tapping into their students, they may be able to do some work. And you don't always have to have actors. I know this is controversial, but you know, retired nurses may want to come back and do some SP work just to give back to the profession. Or people who are in counseling careers, they're usually very good at debriefings. They take those counseling skills and giving feedback, and it makes a great trait for SPs. So you may just have to think outside the box a little bit when it comes to
And
recruiting.
I would throw a word of caution. One of my colleagues and research partner, Bindi Anderson, and I think Susie's on here too, might have been part of it when they started the SP program in Texas. She always talks about that she put an ad in the paper, but then you get all kinds of unreliable folks, because I see a question in the chat about reliability. So you need to be very specific about what you're looking for. What are the training requirements? How often do you expect them to be on campus? Because the last thing you want is to have someone invest in the training in them and they don't realize a 9 to 10 class is 9 to 10. It's not 9:20 to 10:10, because that's when the SP can get there. So you do have to take some of those things into consideration. The other thing you can think about is advertise hosting an SP class. Do you want to make extra cash? This is what an SP is, an embedded participant is. We have an embedded participant program, the Sensations for Life. If anyone out there wants to have a member group at another university, please join. That was total sidebar. But if you get a volunteer group, that's where we tap into our actual retired alum. So we have a membership body that keep in contact with the university through emeritus status and extra things that they, you know, have on campus. So then what we do is we go to their events and say, hey, wouldn't you like to participate and shape the future of healthcare workers and that type of thing. So that's another opportunity in which you can do.
Yeah, and I would say too, don't forget, you have an interview process. Don't just take anyone based off of resume and put them into your program. We give them a script that they must, you know, memorize before they come in for their interview, and we put them through a scenario, including being able to give feedback. So that's another way. Make sure you have a great interview process for your SPs.
And I think too, if it's some of these roles that require ethnic considerations, which are already built into their role, you cannot assume because I'm West Indian, I'm going to act like I'm from Jamaica or with a Jamaican accent. I'm going to act like I'm from the French side of St. Martin in Grand Cause. That's how I grew up. So you need to be specific in your role delineation of what you are looking for. That's also with the responses. So when Kelly's saying about the training and the acting, if you're going to be liberal in your script, like we tend to be liberal because some of our elders and more seasoned volunteers have a hard time remembering specific role, you know, words, and we don't want them to stumble. We give them more of a affective type of role. Probe in the area of vaccines, not state a specific sentence. So trying to figure out what your population is also helpful also.
And we have a brave soul who wants to ask us a question live.
Go ahead.
Annette, go for it.
I'm holding on to my seat. Oh no.
If it's tough, I'm pinging it to you, Desiree.
All right. I better mute so they don't hear the gas.
Where are you at, Annette?
Okay, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you for taking my question. I am actually driving, so I was like, I don't need to be typing.
Thank you for being safe.
So yes, yes, thank you. And so I want to apologize too if maybe you all had mentioned this at the very beginning, but I was just getting off work and was going through a drive-through, so I had to turn down the volume, of course. But anyway, so recently I have been, watching some webinars and, attending different things related to DEI and simulation. And so some of the speakers are saying, we shouldn't, when we're talking about pre-briefing with the students and giving them a report, we shouldn't be sharing really their race or ethnicity. So I'm struggling, and then my department, we have talked about this a little bit, and then I think someone mentioned it at our program, ABSN program meeting already. So I'm just trying to get some understanding, or I'm a little confused about should we or should we not, because the whole premise is, the speakers that I'm listening to are saying, yes, it could be a bias, just from the start, what you give the students report, if you include their, ethnicity or something, and I'm thinking maybe, it could be cultural, religious, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to, my department just started to discuss this. I remember a couple of times I've actually given report to students and intentionally did not include their ethnicity. Now it didn't affect, it didn't seem like it affected, how the students responded and cared for the patient at all. But again, just trying to wrap my head around, not using it, because we typically, share that in the report.
So Danette, I'll take this first, Kel, and then I'll bounce it to you, because this is something that I get passionate about. Like many things, everyone has an opinion on it. And being at the bedside, so I'm still in clinic, but just left acute care bedside a few months ago. Ethnicity and race does play a part in healthcare. Can it cause bias? Absolutely. But so can't the omission of that as well. So if we take something that people don't necessarily think about, for instance, the Asian population does not produce the CYP2 enzyme, which breaks down certain types of narcotics, right? How often do we even hear about this to know that that might be an issue in that culture? I only learned about it when I was finishing up the FMP, and I was like, man, I've never heard about this. So when we have different populations that may have a higher prevalence of a disease, some of it, like we've talked in previous conversations, are really social determinants of health. It has nothing to do with genetics. But then there are genetic factors that do play into that. So I always say it totally depends on the scenario. I'm a proponent for putting that in there, no different than if I'm caring for a trans male. I want to know that it's a trans male before I go into the room, or a student goes into the room and is like, they're bounding their breasts or binding their breasts or something like that, because you know that prior to entering the room. Now, I don't think that's a bias issue. I think that's having some cultural humility, understanding that you may personally have implicit bias prior to entering into that room. That's just my thought. Kel?
No, I agree with you, Desiree. And I would say, I avoid starting my cases with, for example, 27-year-old Black male, blah, 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 blah. But just like a chart, your chart is going to have a section for race. It's going to have a section for religion, language, and all that. So when I give the students assignments, I have that. And that's the template I use for all of my cases. But I don't present the case based on a race, put it like that. So.
That's Kelly's bird in the background.
I was going to say.
Don't mind Kelly's
bird.
On that too, it's interesting, Danette, that you bring this up, because one of our healthcare disparity cases, Laerdal is working on and putting up for the iCloud. And we've had this discussion on a broader level do we put the Afro-Caribbean term? So you heard that in the dialogue that Kelly and I had recorded. And that was one of the instances, because I was just reviewing the case with them. And is it important? Is it not? Well, once you start talking about Hispanic women have higher postpartum depression, Black and brown women are dying, well, there is an importance to that. On the flip side of that, you can't go into someone's room and just totally looking at the tonality of their skin and say, oh, you know what? That's a white woman. Well, your assumption based on the tonality of their skin may make you not assess something. And I'll give the example of my aunt, who is maybe a little lighter than me, but she's Afro-Caribbean. You know, my fourth grandma back was a slave, so she's definitely Afro-Caribbean, placed on ACE inhibitors, ended up with angioedema. They didn't realize she was of Black descent. And like she said, they never asked her. And once she's on a vent, it's kind of too late to have that discussion. So I think there's real relevance in that question. And again, it comes with how genuine you are. Where is that place coming from? Please feel free. Good question.
Good question. Any other questions out there? And again, if you're a little shy, you can put it in the chat. Otherwise, we'd love to hear from you live.
I want to go back to whose question was this? Jude's question from Arkansas. I don't know what the diversity of your actual student body is. But I've also toyed with the idea with asking some of our students of different, you know, what I would say visual representation of a specific group. Would you like to participate in creating a scenario or be vetting the scenario through them? But I do get stumbled up in the words. I don't want to say and be a hypocrite. Hey, you look like you're from Dubai. Can you come check this out? So an easy way to say that is, I'm looking to create a case based on the Hindu religion. Anyone here with ancestry from whatever region, would you like to work with me on that? So I've gotten a lot of good response from that, because learners like to have cases that reflect them or something they can identify with too.
Did you see Jude's comment, Desiree? All right.
Yay, Jude, we'll have to talk after. Please send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. Our Sensations for Life started, actually, it was birthed in the University of Connecticut, where it used to be. They have a sim group also, but the student club is great for all of you who might even be in the acute care side of things. We are the embedded participants for disaster drills and all of that, and then do community outreach for Boy Scout, Girl Scout troops, all, you know, high schools. So it's good. We have to grow our young simulationists.
I don't see any other questions. And I just want to put a plug in. There's a great article that has just been published by Kim Layton also. And it is titled, and excuse me if I get it wrong, it's about holistic assessment is in the title. And I'm sorry if I don't have the right, but I would say definitely good article to read, because it has very good tips on not only how to put ethnicity, but spirituality, and other aspects into your scenario with concrete examples. And I'm one of those, I like tangible things that I can take and put right into my simulation curriculum. So definitely recommend that article. And if I can, I'll find it and put the link in the chat.
Yeah, and Dr. Leighton was just talking on a panel about that. She's actually in Qatar, and there's 120 different ethnicities. So she's struggling with which ones do you pick for your scenario. So very interesting switch of the table, right? Where we only look at a small few that we pick from, but how do you represent demographic that is extremely diverse. Any other questions? Great discussion.
All right. If there are no other questions, guess what time it is, Desiree? Time to announce the winner of the Healthcare Simulation Week video contest.
Woo! I was trying to come up with some drums, but
I know we needed sound effects.
little
I'm missing
maracas.
that. So I guess we'll start, I believe, let me go to our email so we can announce the winners, and hopefully have some of the video contestants here with us today.
I have my spirit fingers up a little celebratory hat, whatever my little reactions will do.
All right, and just give me a second to open up the email. I thought I had it
We
open.
do want to say, as co-chairs for Healthcare Simulation Week, we are so thankful for the videos that went in. We know it's time consuming or something added, but it's really fun to vote and see you all's creativity. So thank you for that.
And so many people participated, especially in the voting process. So thank you. Oh, goodness. And where are Curtis? I know you sent it to me. Oh, here we go. All right. So we had two categories. We had the shoestring category, because we know everybody doesn't have this nice budget to have this, video that's produced. So this is for the people who have their iPhone or their Android and they're filming with their phone. So the winner for the shoestring category is Simulation Week from the CC Sim group. And Curtis, that's all the information I have. So I don't know if we have the full name of the organization.
I think it's in their video. I'll play it for you.
All right.
So we're going to play the video.
And the winner. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, that was almost perfect timing.
Este año fue difícil para todos.
Es por ello que no nos rendimos frente a las circunstancias y porque sabemos que el trabajo en equipo lleva grandes logros.
Seguimos preparándonos virtualmente en revisión de temas de simulación clínica como la comunicación de malas noticias y el desarrollo y fortalecimiento de habilidades blandas,
basados siempre en el código de ética del simulacionista en salud.
Además, estamos convencidos que en nuestra formación no solo es importante la adquisición de conocimientos,
sino también saber relacionarnos con nuestro entorno.
y por ello tocamos temas sobre teatro y coaching que nos sirven para nuestra formación médica y para nuestras prácticas.
Difundimos nuestras actividades por medio de periódicos murales y flashcards en nuestra página social del CCSIM para repasar y compartir conocimientos.
Desde la formación del Centro de Simulación de la Facultad de Medicina de la UNSA, en el año 2018, se ideó la conformación de nuestro círculo de calidad.
Nos capacitamos en simulación y de esta manera podemos apoyar en las múltiples actividades del Centro de Simulación.
La transición de lo presencial a lo virtual permite reinventarnos y así conocer nuevas herramientas que nos ayuden a fomentar el buen uso de la simulación clínica.
AUC, we believe in unity through diversity.
At AUC,
Sorry.
Congratulations to the winner.
And I love the little heart with Sim at the end. That was awesome. All right. So our next category is professionally, or we'll say semi-professionally produced. So Hollywood category. And the entry was improvise, adapt, overcome. CCN tied together. And here we go.
In March of 2020, faculty, staff, and students at the Capstone College of Nursing left for spring break filled with uncertainty regarding the spread of COVID-19 the safety of their families, and whether we would return to finish the semester. Later that week, the university closed its doors in hopes of protecting our faculty, staff, and students. The learning labs were empty, the hallways were silent, but with a commitment to provide excellence in nursing education, faculty and staff pulled together to improvise, adapt, and overcome. To provide a safe environment for every student at CCN, faculty and staff worked together and tirelessly to provide extended lab hours, simulation-based experiences via Zoom, and supplies and models for at-home practice. We would like to dedicate this video to all of you who have made the past year possible and who have proven that we are tied together.
I love the play on words there, the rolling tide. Very nice, very nice. Are any of the winners in the room? Kelly, put that in the. Christina, are you a Alabama person? Roll Tide.
All right.
Oh.
No, she's a mom.
Hey.
That counts. So, great videos. Thank you again for all the submissions and everyone who took the time out to vote. So I think we have come to an end. So I want to thank you for being with us today. Again, Desiree and I are very passionate about this topic. So we hope that you learned something that you can take back to your simulation curriculum to be a little bit more inclusive in DEI in your simulation curriculum. So
and make sure you tune in tomorrow at 10 a.m. for Dr. Penny Watts. She'll be talking about healthcare simulation standards of best practice and what those updates and changes were. Now, if you were used to our sessions from earlier in the week till tomorrow, Dr. Watts's is a little longer due to the fact that there are more standards. So just make sure you plan for that time in your day. And we look forward to seeing you there.
Happy Healthcare Sim Week, everyone. We'll see you soon.
See you later.